In the endless canyons of northern Arizona, where red rock meets infinite sky, a rancher was about to discover that sometimes the most profound connections arrive when we least expect them. What Jack Murphy found following him through those ancient trails would test everything he believed about wild horses, legal boundaries, and the kind of love that demands we let go of what we treasure most. Jack had been riding these trails for over 20 years. At 55, he moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than behind any desk. The Double M Ranch stretched across 15,000 acres of some of the most beautiful and unforgiving land in the Southwest. 3 generations of Murphys had worked this soil, shaped by it as much as they'd shaped it. His horse Ranger snorted suddenly, ears pricked forward at something Jack couldn't yet see. The gelding was 12 years old, a sturdy quarter horse with uncommon intelligence and an uncanny ability to sense things before his rider did. "What is it, boy?" Jack murmured, scanning the horizon. The canyon opened up before them like a vast amphitheater of red rock and sagebrush, unchanged for thousands of years. Jack's thoughts drifted to his late wife Linda. She'd been gone 3 years now, claimed by a heart attack that took her far too young. The grief had settled into something more manageable, but he still missed their conversations, the way she could read his moods without him saying a word. Ranger suddenly stopped, refusing to move forward despite Jack's gentle urging. In 20 years of riding this country, Jack had learned to trust the horse's instincts completely. Jack scanned the landscape ahead, his experienced eyes moving methodically. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement among the rocks, perhaps 75 yards ahead. A young foal emerged from behind a boulder, its coat a dusty brown that caught the sunlight. The animal was small, clearly very young, probably no more than 3 or 4 months old. It stood motionless for a moment, watching them with large dark eyes, then took several hesitant steps forward. Jack's first reaction was confusion. Wild horses weren't uncommon in this part of Arizona, but foals this young were rarely seen without their mothers nearby. Something was wrong with this picture. The foal's movements were unsteady, almost weak. Its head hung low, and even from a distance Jack could see that its ribs were showing beneath its coat. "Where's your mama, little one?" Jack whispered. The foal took another few steps toward them, and Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Wild horses were naturally wary animals, avoiding human contact whenever possible. For a foal to approach them so openly suggested either extreme desperation or something seriously wrong. Jack slowly reached for his binoculars. Through the magnified lenses, the animal's condition became heartbreakingly clear. The foal was severely underweight, its coat dull and matted. Its eyes held a desperate quality Jack recognized from years of working with animals, the look of a creature pushed to the very edge of survival. The foal couldn't weigh more than 200 pounds. Far too light for an animal of its apparent age. It should have been sleek and healthy, learning to graze under its mother's guidance. Instead, it looked like it hadn't eaten properly in weeks. The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. Something had happened to the mother. Wild foals stayed with their mothers for up to a year, learning the complex skills necessary for survival. Without that guidance and protection, this young animal was facing a death sentence. The foal took another step forward, and Jack noticed something that made his heart clench. The animal was looking directly at him with something that looked almost like hope. As if the foal understood that Jack represented its only chance for survival. Against decades of accumulated wisdom about dealing with wild animals, Jack dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Let's see what we're dealing with here," he said quietly. Jack took a step toward the foal, then another. The young horse didn't flee. Instead, it nickered softly, a sound of recognition and greeting that wild foals typically reserved for their mothers. Up close, its condition was even more alarming. Jack could count every rib beneath its fur. Its eyes had the slightly sunken look of severe dehydration. The foal made another sound, not quite a whinny, not quite a cry, but something plaintive and desperate that cut through Jack's defenses like a knife. It was the sound of an animal at the absolute end of its resources, appealing to the only source of help it could find. Jack had dealt with orphaned animals before, but this was different. Every rational part of his mind told him to back away, to call the Bureau of Land Management and report the orphaned foal, to let proper authorities handle the situation. But looking into those dark eyes, seeing the desperate hope reflected there, Jack felt something shift inside him. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, little one," Jack said quietly. His voice seemed to calm the foal, whose ears pricked forward at the sound. Jack found himself thinking of Linda, wondering what she would have done. She'd always been the one with the soft heart for strays and orphans. "Everything deserves a chance," she used to say. "Sometimes we're the only chance they get." The memory hit him with unexpected force. What would she say about this desperate young foal looking to him for salvation? Jack knew the answer, and it both frightened and comforted him. Jack spent 2 hours simply sitting with the foal, neither moving toward nor away from the desperate animal. The young horse settled into a patch of shade, its dark eyes never leaving Jack's face. Ranger grazed nearby, having decided this wild animal posed no threat. The sun climbed higher, and Jack faced an impossible decision. He couldn't leave the foal here to die. But bringing a wild horse to the ranch presented problems he wasn't prepared to handle. Jack pulled out his cell phone. No signal, as expected. He was on his own with this decision. The foal made another plaintive sound, and Jack felt his resolve crystallize. "All right, little one," he said quietly. "I guess we're going to figure this out together." Moving slowly, Jack retrieved a canvas tarp from his saddlebags and spread it on the ground. Using pieces of apple from his lunch, he gradually coaxed the foal onto the tarp. The process took nearly an hour, but eventually the young animal was lying on the canvas, too exhausted to resist but clearly trusting Jack enough to remain calm. The ride back to the ranch was unlike anything Jack had experienced. He wrapped the foal gently in the tarp, creating a makeshift carrier secured to his saddle. The animal, weakened by hunger and perhaps sensing that help had finally arrived, offered no resistance. Roberto Santos, Jack's foreman and closest friend, emerged from the equipment barn as they approached. "Boss," Roberto called out. "You're back early. Everything all right?" Jack dismounted carefully, acutely aware of his precious cargo. "Roberto, I need you to prepare yourself for something unusual." Roberto's experienced eyes immediately noted the awkward bundle. "What you got there?" "Something that's going to test both our judgment," Jack replied, beginning to untie the tarp. "I found this little one up on the ridge trail. Looks like it's been on its own for a while." As Jack unwrapped the tarp, Roberto's eyes widened. "That's a wild foal. And it's half-starved," Jack said, lifting the foal gently. The animal was conscious but weak, offering no resistance. "Question is, what do we do now?" Roberto studied the foal's condition, and Jack could see the internal struggle playing out on his friend's face. Roberto had grown up on ranches where wild horses were viewed with respect and wariness, but he was also a man who couldn't turn away from suffering. "Where's its mother?" Roberto asked. "Gone. Has to be. For this little one to be in this condition." Roberto removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. "You know what the BLM folks are going to say about keeping a wild horse on the ranch?" "I know exactly what they'll say," Jack replied. "But Roberto, look at this animal. Really look at it." Roberto did look, and Jack saw the moment when practical considerations gave way to compassion. "I couldn't leave it up there to die," Jack said quietly. "Linda would never have forgiven me." The mention of Jack's late wife seemed to settle something for Roberto. He'd loved Linda like a sister. "All right," Roberto said finally. "What do you need me to do?" Together, they converted an old equipment shed behind the main barn into a makeshift foal nursery. Roberto worked efficiently, clearing out years of accumulated equipment while Jack drove to town for supplies: milk replacer, soft hay, water troughs. Back at the ranch, Roberto had transformed the shed into something resembling an equine nursery. The concrete floor was covered with soft straw. Fresh water sat in one corner. Additional lighting had been rigged from the barn. "Pretty fancy accommodations for a wild horse," Roberto observed as they settled the foal into its new quarters. It's temporary, Jack said, though he wondered if that was true. Just until we figure out what comes next. As evening approached, the foal began showing signs of genuine recovery. The combination of shelter, water, and regular feeding worked a remarkable transformation. The animal's eyes were brighter, its movements more confident. It's going to need feeding every few hours tonight, Roberto observed. Foals this young need almost constant nutrition. I'll take the first shift, Jack said automatically. That evening, Jack sat in the shed with the foal for longer than usual, watching as the young animal explored its enclosure with increasing confidence. Its recovery had been remarkable, but questions about legal implications weighed on his mind. Roberto found him there as darkness fell. Brooding isn't going to solve anything, boss. I keep thinking about what Linda would do, Jack said. She always seemed to know the right thing, even in impossible situations. Linda would tell you that loving something sometimes means letting it go, Roberto replied gently. Even when letting go breaks your heart. If this story is touching your heart, please share it with someone who understands that sometimes the bravest act of love is knowing when to open our hands and set something free. The crisis came when Roberto's teenage daughter mentioned the cute baby horse to a friend. Within days, rumors circulated through town. The local newspaper called asking about wild horse rescue reports. Most concerning, someone had contacted the Bureau of Land Management. Sheriff Tom Bradley called on Thursday afternoon. Jack, I'm getting some interesting reports about activities on your ranch. Thought I might drive out and have a chat. Jack met the sheriff at the front gate. Tom Bradley was 52, a career law enforcement officer who'd known Jack for 15 years. Their friendship made this conversation both easier and more difficult. Tom, Jack said, shaking the sheriff's hand. What brings you out this way? I'm hearing stories about you taking in a wild horse, Tom replied. Please tell me these are just rumors. Jack weighed his options briefly, then decided on honesty. It's not what you think, Tom. Then help me understand, because it looks like you're harboring a wild horse without proper permits or documentation. It's a foal, Tom. Orphaned, half-starved. When I found it, I couldn't just leave it to die. And I respect that, Jack. But this isn't a stray dog. This is a protected species, and there are protocols for this situation. The conversation stretched into the afternoon. Tom's radio crackled occasionally with routine calls, reminders that the outside world continued while Jack's life grew increasingly complicated. Sometimes doing the right thing and doing the legal thing aren't the same, Jack said quietly. I found that foal dying, Tom. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to call the BLM. Let them handle it according to protocols. And what would those protocols have been? Euthanasia. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Possibly. Wild horse foals without mothers don't have many options. So I was supposed to let it die to avoid complications. Jack, I'm not saying it's a good system. I'm saying it's the system we have. Tom's voice carried frustration. Right now, you're operating outside that system in ways that could create legal problems. Jack pulled out his leather journal, a gesture that had become habitual when he needed to think. The pages were filling with observations about the foal's progress, each entry representing his growing investment in an animal that legally he had no business caring for. Tom, if you found a child in trouble, would you wait for official protocols or would you act? That's not the same thing, isn't it? We're talking about a young creature that can't survive alone. The fact that it's a wild horse doesn't make its need for help less real. Tom studied Jack's face carefully. This isn't just about rescue anymore, is it? You've gotten attached to that animal. The accusation hit home. Over the past week, Jack's routine had reorganized around the foal's needs. He looked forward to feeding times, to the brief periods when the young horse would allow him to sit nearby. The animal's intelligence and growing trust had created an emotional bond he hadn't anticipated. I'm providing temporary care until a permanent solution can be found, Jack said defensively. Jack. Tom's voice gentled. I've seen this before. It starts with rescue and ends with possession. There's no middle ground. Tom was quiet for several minutes, looking across the ranch that had been in Jack's family for generations. Finally, he spoke. I can give you some time. Not much, but some. The BLM is going to hear about this eventually. When they do, they'll want to inspect your facilities and evaluate the animal. And then, Tom's silence was answer enough. That evening, Jack sat with the foal, whom he'd begun calling Salvador, watching as the young animal moved around its enclosure with increasing confidence. Its recovery had been remarkable, but Tom's warnings echoed in his mind. Roberto found him there as the last light faded. Brooding won't solve anything, boss. Roberto, what if there's a way to give it a good life without putting anyone in legal jeopardy? Roberto sat beside him. Maybe there is, amigo. But you won't find it by keeping Salvador in a shed. This animal needs more than you can provide. Salvador approached them, drawn by familiar voices. The foal had grown noticeably, its movements more coordinated and powerful. Jack could see hints of the magnificent horse it would become. Dr. Coleman called this afternoon, Roberto continued. She's been researching facilities that might take Salvador. There's a sanctuary in Colorado that specializes in wild horses. Jack felt something twist in his chest. Intellectually, he knew placement in a proper facility would be best for Salvador. But emotionally, the thought of losing this unexpected connection felt like losing part of himself. When? Jack asked quietly. They can send someone next week if we give them the go-ahead. Salvador settled near Jack's feet, the warm weight of its body a reminder of how much had changed. The foal's dark eyes held intelligence and awareness that made Jack's decision even more difficult. Set it up, Jack said finally, his voice rough. Let's see what they have to say. The Wild Horse Sanctuary evaluator arrived on Tuesday morning. Dr. Renee Martin was a woman in her 40s with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent years working with wild horses. Her presence meant the beginning of the end of Jack's time with Salvador. Jack had spent the previous evening with the foal, trying to memorize details he'd come to treasure. The way Salvador tilted his head at unfamiliar sounds. The soft nickering when content. The graceful way he moved despite his youth. Dr. Martin conducted her evaluation with methodical thoroughness, taking photographs, measurements, extensive notes on Salvador's behavior and condition. Jack watched as she interacted with the foal, noting how Salvador responded with curiosity rather than fear. He's remarkably well socialized, Dr. Martin observed as Salvador cautiously approached her hand. No signs of stress or aggression. You've done excellent work with his rehabilitation. Jack felt both pride and sorrow at her words. Will your facility be able to take him? Based on what I'm seeing, yes. He's healthy, alert, and while he's comfortable with humans, he hasn't lost his essential wildness. With proper management, he should adapt well to sanctuary life. As they spoke, Roberto came running across the ranch, his face flushed with excitement and alarm. Jack, you need to see this. There's something at the north fence line. Jack's instinct was to stay during Salvador's evaluation, but Roberto's urgency was unmistakable. Go handle whatever needs handling, Dr. Martin said. I'll continue my assessment. The ride to the north fence line revealed a scene that took Jack's breath away. Standing beyond the property boundary, magnificent in the morning sunlight, was a bay mare unlike any horse Jack had ever seen. She was wild, obvious from her bearing and the wary alertness in her eyes. But there was something else that made Jack's heart race with understanding. She was calling. Not random vocalizations, but the specific urgent calls of a mother seeking her child. And from the ranch buildings, barely audible across the distance, came an answering call that Jack recognized immediately. Salvador was responding. Roberto, Jack said quietly. I think we're looking at Salvador's mother. The mare had clearly been searching for a long time. Her coat showed signs of hard travel, sweat stains, minor cuts from brush and rocks, the lean look of an animal covering vast distances. but her eyes held the fierce determination that only a mother could possess. As they watched, Salvador's calls became more urgent, and the mare began moving along the fence line, testing for weaknesses, looking for a way to reach her foal's voice. Her movements were purposeful and increasingly agitated. She's been following his scent, Roberto realized. All the way here. Jack felt everything click into place. The rope scar around Salvador's neck. The foal's condition when he found it. The desperation in its eyes. This wasn't abandonment. Somehow, mother and foal had been separated, probably during a BLM roundup or by illegal horse traders. "We have to get back," Jack said urgently. "Dr. Martin needs to see this." They arrived to find Dr. Martin standing outside the shed, her professional composure shaken by what she was witnessing. Salvador was pacing his enclosure frantically, calling continuously toward where his mother waited. "Dr. Martin," Jack called out. "We need to discuss a change in plans." The wildlife expert turned toward them, eyes wide with understanding. "That's the mother, isn't it? The calls have been going back and forth for 10 minutes. I've never seen behavior quite like this." "She followed him here," Jack explained quickly. "She's been searching for weeks, maybe months. This changes everything." Dr. Martin was quiet for a long moment, her training warring with the unprecedented situation. "If that's truly the mother, and she's been tracking him," she paused, watching Salvador's agitated behavior. "This could be the most successful wild horse reunion in recorded history. But we have to be extremely careful. Wild mares can be dangerous when protecting their young." "What do we do?" Jack asked. "First, we document everything. This is scientifically significant. Second, we contact the BLM immediately. Third," she paused, looking at Salvador's distress, "we need to reunite them before this causes more psychological trauma." The next hours passed in a blur of phone calls and preparations. The BLM sent a representative. The sheriff arrived. Dr. Martin called university colleagues to document what she was calling unprecedented maternal bonding in wild horses. But Jack's attention remained focused on Salvador. The foal was showing extreme stress, pacing, calling constantly, refusing food. Every fiber of his being was focused on reaching the mare whose voice he could hear but couldn't see. "We need to do this soon," Dr. Martin said quietly. "The longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes for both animals." The reunion required careful orchestration. The mare had to be led to a larger paddock where the meeting could take place safely. Salvador had to be moved from his enclosure to the same area, with multiple people positioned to intervene if necessary. Jack opened Salvador's gate with trembling hands. The foal immediately moved toward the opening, but paused at the threshold, looking back at Jack with what seemed like gratitude or farewell. "Go on, son," Jack said softly. "She's waiting for you." Salvador stepped cautiously into the larger paddock, his movements revealing the instinctive wariness developing beneath his comfortable domesticity. The mare, who'd been pacing along the far fence, stopped the moment she saw her foal emerge. First contact between mother and foal was tentative. Mutual sniffing. Soft vocalizations that carried across the paddock like a conversation humans could recognize but not understand. Then, as if some invisible barrier dissolved, Salvador rushed to his mother, and she began the grooming behaviors Jack had read about but never witnessed. "Incredible," Dr. Martin breathed, recording everything. "The bond is completely intact. It's as if they were never separated." Jack watched the reunion with emotions he couldn't untangle. Joy at seeing Salvador restored to his natural family. Sorrow at losing the companion who'd brought unexpected meaning to his life. And deep satisfaction at knowing he'd made the right choice despite its personal cost. The horse's behavior over the next hour provided compelling evidence that the reunion was successful. Salvador exhibited increasingly natural behaviors, alert environmental scanning, response to his mother's communication cues, gradual reduction in attention to the humans who'd cared for him. But Jack's celebration was interrupted by additional arrivals, a BLM transport trailer and a news van from the regional television station. The BLM representative, Patricia Wells, approached with professional determination. "Mr. Murphy, I understand you've been providing care for a wild horse without proper authorization." "I've been keeping an orphan foal alive," Jack corrected. "And as you can see, returning it to its mother was always the goal." Dr. Martin quickly intervened, her credentials providing authority Jack lacked. "Ms. Wells, what we're witnessing here is unprecedented. This represents a conservation success story that should be celebrated, not prosecuted." Dr. Martin, regulations exist for important reasons. Wild horses can't be kept by private citizens regardless of circumstances. Jack looked at Salvador and his mother, now grazing peacefully together. The foal stayed close to the mare's side, both animals relaxed and content for the first time since their separation. "Ms. Wells, look at them. Do you see animals being kept by a private citizen? They're free to leave whenever they choose." Indeed, the paddock gate was open, and both horses were aware of their ability to depart. They remained not because they were trapped, but because this had become a place of safety and reunion. "The question now," Dr. Martin said, "is what happens next. These animals have been successfully reunited. The foal has recovered from near starvation and appears to be thriving. The mother demonstrated remarkable persistence in tracking and reclaiming her offspring. This is exactly the outcome conservation efforts are designed to achieve." Ms. Wells struggled with a situation that didn't fit standard protocols. These animals will need to be returned to appropriate wild horse management areas. We can't have them wandering around private ranch land indefinitely. Dr. Martin stepped forward with a suggestion that surprised everyone. "What if we could document this reunion as part of an ongoing research study? Track these animals using GPS collars. Study their movement patterns, their integration back into wild populations. This could provide valuable data for future wild horse management decisions." The suggestion caught Ms. Wells's attention. "You're proposing to use this situation as a research opportunity?" "I'm proposing we learn from it. How often do we observe successful mother-foal reunions after extended separation? How often can we study the effectiveness of private citizen intervention in wildlife emergencies? This is a chance to gather data that could improve how we handle similar situations." Jack watched with growing hope. If the horses could be monitored rather than simply removed, if their story could contribute to better outcomes for other wild animals, then perhaps the bond they'd formed would have lasting meaning. The negotiations continued for over an hour, involving phone calls to supervisors, discussions of research protocols, careful examination of the horses. In the end, a compromise was reached that satisfied legal requirements while preserving the conservation value of what had occurred. Salvador and his mother would be fitted with GPS collars and released to return to wild horse territory. Their movements would be monitored as part of Dr. Martin's research into wild horse family dynamics. Jack would face no legal consequences for his temporary care of the foal, provided he agreed to contact authorities immediately if he encountered similar situations. As the afternoon wore on and official business concluded, Jack found himself alone with the horses one final time. Salvador approached the fence where Jack stood, nuzzling his shoulder in the gentle gesture that had become familiar over their weeks together. "You did good, son," Jack whispered, running his hand along the foal's neck. "You survived. You grew strong. And you found your way back to where you belong." The mare watched this interaction with calm acceptance, seeming to understand that Jack posed no threat to her foal. Indeed, her behavior suggested gratitude rather than wariness, as if she recognized that this human had cared for her child when she could not. As the sun began to set, Jack watched Salvador and his mother walk toward the open range that stretched beyond his property line. They moved together with the natural grace of wild horses, the foal staying close to his mother's side, both animals alert to their environment but no longer desperate or afraid. Salvador paused at the crest of a small hill, silhouetted against the evening sky. For a moment, he looked back toward the ranch buildings, toward the man who'd given him a second chance at life. Then he turned and followed his mother into the vast landscape that was their true home. Jack stood watching until they disappeared into the gathering darkness, feeling a profound sense of completion. He had loved deeply and let go completely, the most difficult and most necessary act of true compassion. Roberto approached quietly, carrying coffee and the understanding that comes from shared experience. "You did the right thing, boss. Linda would have been proud." "I hope so," Jack said, accepting the coffee gratefully. As they stood together in comfortable silence, a sound drifted across the canyon, the distant call of a horse, wild and free, carrying on the evening wind like a song of gratitude. It might have been Salvador or his mother or some other horse entirely. But to Jack, it sounded like a promise that love, once given freely, creates bonds that transcend time and distance. 6 months later, Jack received regular updates from Dr. Martin's research team. Salvador and his mother had successfully integrated with a wild horse herd in the high country. The foal had grown into a magnificent young stallion, healthy and strong. The GPS data showed they traveled hundreds of miles across some of the most beautiful terrain in the Southwest, living exactly as nature intended. Sometimes on his weekly rides through the canyon country, Jack would pause at the place where he'd first found Salvador. He would pull out his leather journal and record his observations about wildlife, weather, and the eternal cycles of the natural world. And sometimes, carried on the wind from distant mesas, he would hear the voices of wild horses running free across the endless landscape they both loved. If this story moved you, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the deepest love is often the love that knows when to let go. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and the power of compassion over convenience. And subscribe for more stories that celebrate the unbreakable bonds between humans and the magnificent creatures who teach us what it truly means to love without conditions. Drop a comment and tell us about a time you had to make the difficult choice between what you wanted and what was right. We'd love to hear your story. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is opening your hands and setting something free.